Hi and welcome to this strategic series. In this series of videos, I'm going to be showing you how to deploy. So in this first video, I'm going to be showing you what you need to look at in terms of your army, the composition, what it does, and then also how you need to deploy so that you are able to keep your units alive for as long as you possibly can and making sure that you can hit back hard. I'm Stephen Box from Vanguard Tactics, and it's my job to help you become a better 40k gamer. So this is part 1, and then part 2 and part 3 are over on our Patreon page. So if you want to see part 2 and part 3, there are 2 ways to do so. Number 1 is head over directly to Patreon, where we keep all of our content and all of our content library, and to do so, that is at Vanguard Tactics over on Patreon. If you're unsure on how to find that, then just by subscribing to our email list, I'm going to send you the link simply to find you and direct you to that Patreon site where you can get all the content that you need. Deployment is so important, and it's one of those things, if you don't get it right, what's going to happen, and you probably feel like this a lot when you're playing, is that you're constantly on the back foot. Nothing ever seems to go right, you seem to lose a lot of units, and your opponent seems to kill a lot more of units than you manage to kill of theirs. And in my opinion, it all comes down to deploying wrong. And this was something that I learned time and time again and really struggled with until I started to develop a system that allowed me to really hone my skills and develop it. And I'm going to show you those skills now over these next 3 videos. And in this video, I'm going to be showing you everything that there is to know around deployment in regards to your own list. And I've got an example army here for you, but the principles are going to remain the same no matter what army you play. The first thing to really understand is what is it that your army is very good at, and also what is it that can be quite weak against. Let me quickly talk you over this list, and then we're going to go into how we need to deploy this army so that we can take full advantage of the screen and also any aura buffs, and making sure that we are in range of our targets. So just to keep this really simple, we have a company commander, a tank commander, and then 3 units of guardsmen of 10 man. So essentially, these 3 10-man units are to do 2 things. They are to screen, and they're also to capture objectives. The company commander is simply there to allow them to increase their movement range, and also can also be used in deployment as a way of screening out the backfield as a character, because he won't be able to be targeted. The tank commander, on the other hand, he is a heavy hitter. He is one of my long-range pieces of artillery that I'm going to be using to hopefully destroy the opponent. So I need to keep him safe, and because although he is a character and he is over the 10 wound mark, he can be targeted, so that makes him extremely vulnerable. We've then got a patrol detachment of a Death Watch captain, and then also a unit of 10 Death Watch veterans. So this is more like your elite unit in the game. It could be 10 Dark Reapers, and an Autarch, anything with like a reroll 1 buff or a +1 to hit, any sort of aura benefit that you might have, and then an elite unit. Then we have a super heavy auxiliary detachment, which is the Knight. So again, very long range threat, also a medium threat, and a close combat threat as well. So we've got some different units here, and no matter what army you do play, I'm sure you'll be able to think about some things in your list that are very similar. So we're using guardsmen. This could easily be Tau Fire Warriors, or this could easily be cultists. So what I've just done is I've put out a table, and obviously I've put down some terrain for us to work around. So quite simply, the first thing is you need to make sure that you are protecting your assets, and one of those is obviously the tank commander. So the tank commander, and just a regular sort of typical mistake I see people make, if we are playing a Dawn of War deployment, so we've got 12 inches on, which takes us to here. I'll leave the rule as a constant reminder of our 12-inch deployment. We can deploy up to this mark here. Now, a lot of people would just use their tank commander because it's got a long range, and they would want to try and get an alpha strike on their opponent. So there would be an army on the other side of this table, and they would pretty much put him just right here out in the open. Now, the problem with that is that you're not guaranteed to go first. They could either seize on you, or you might not even get that option to go first, depending on the types of mission pack that you use. So what I would suggest doing with a heavy hitter like this is making sure that you put him out of line of sight. So, for example, we've got some ruins here. Both of these areas are blocked for line of sight. So the best thing that you can do is actually put the tank commander out of line of sight. Now, regardless of whatever tank it might be, if you're able to hide it, I definitely would. If you are unable to hide it, then your other option is to put it out of range. So think, first of all, can I hide it? Second of all, can I put it out of range? And then you know you're basically protecting yourself from any type of alpha strikes that might take him off the board even before you get to use him. And that is such a common mistake. I know I've done it many a times. And you know, this could be a fire prism. This could be a Tau hammerhead. Whatever it might be, if you have the opportunity to hide it or put it out of range, that's goal number one. Now, I'm going to come on to some of the other threats in the game. We're talking about shooting at the moment, so that's why line of sight is important. A combat alpha strike where something can charge you turn one is a completely different story, and that might change the way you deploy, and I'm going to go on to that. So, the tank commander, he's nice and safe out of the way. Okay, then the second thing that you might need to be aware of is that they might have a deep strike mechanic. So I would say most armies do have a deep strike mechanic of sorts. So you need to make sure that you are zoning out 9 inches on your backfield, okay? Because some armies have a redeploy ability and others have that deep strike mechanic. So simply, just by putting one guardsman 9 inches away from the edge of the board, from the corner, so you measure diagonal, that is where your first guardsman needs to go, then you can put your unit out to not only screen your tank commander from a combat threat, but also zone out that area so you can stop anything dropping in. Most armies can only deep strike in turn 2. Okay, so we know roughly where this guardsman needs to go, and it's about an inch away from this cover. So what I would do with this whole entire unit is, again, he doesn't need to be in this position at turn 1 when you deploy him. So what I would do is simply just put the whole unit, again, out of line of sight, behind cover, so they're going to get the benefit of a cover save if they have anything like a mortar or artillery that doesn't need line of sight. And also it just means that you're now not going to give away your screen by deploying them on the front line, because there's absolutely no need for you to do that just yet. Remember, you've got, with deep strike mechanics, they can either come in on turn 2 or turn 3. However, if your opponent does have a redeploy relic or an ability to do so, like for example, if you're playing orcs and they have the psychic power to jump, then obviously you need to make sure that you do that right from the beginning. And you might have to forfeit the fact that some of your guys are not hiding. However, some of those armies that are typically more combat based, that have that redeploy element, tend to, when we look at orcs for example, not quite have the long range shooting. They might have one good unit, but you're going to have to take some losses. Anyway, so that's that. Second of all, we now need to make sure that our aura buffs, and the other thing that I did here with the tank commander is I'm just making sure he's touching the terrain, or he's in the area of the terrain, because by doing so, even if they are able to, for example, bring a flyer round into this position and draw a line of sight onto the very back part of my tank, then at least I'm going to get a cover save. So, and it's going to make it extremely difficult for your opponent to actually do so, okay, if they do have a very fast flying vehicle. So I've got the knight. As you can see, no matter where I put him, he's going to be basically visible. So I can't really hide him out of line of sight like I can with a smaller tank. So these Titanic vehicles, or huge creatures, you probably won't be able to do that. So option number one, can you put them in deep strike or an ability where they come on from the edge or something like that? That is an option. Or what you can do is deploy them on the battlefield, but do your best job you possibly can to put them out of range of most things. So one of the first things that you need to know is your opponent's army's threat range. And again, there'll be another series on threat ranges, whether they're combat, psychic, or shooting. But quite simply, how far can your opponent's big hitting units that are going to cause this the most stress and damage, what is the range of their weaponry? And are you able to look at the opposition's deployment and guess where they're going to put those, for example, tanks or heavy hitting units? Then what you can do is go, I know that I've got a 12-inch movement, and then my Avenger Gatling cannon has a 36-inch range. So then I know that my threat range with my move and my shoot is now 48 inches. So that pretty much covers quite a good portion of the board. The battle cannon has a range of 72 inches. So that means no matter where I am, if I move 12 inches, I'm probably going to be within range of something. So again, a massive mistake I see from people making is that just because the knight is very good in combat and he has a 36-inch weapon, it doesn't mean you actually have to use it turn one. So what I would do with the knight, if I'm in a long-range firefight, so let's say the opposing army's range is 36 inches, plus their movement, which might be 8, for example. So that means their range is 42 inches. I'm going to put this knight 43 inches away from where I think that their tanks or heavy hitting units are going to be. So that might just be, again, probably in this corner perhaps, or it might even be at the backfield if they don't have that much range at all. Okay, so let's say we go on this left-hand flank, just there. So if any armies are over there, in their corner, they're going to be out of range. They might have one or two things in the other corner that might be able to draw a line of sight and also range, but it's probably not going to be enough to kill him, so that means I'm still going to be able to use him first turn. If the deployment was different and it was hammer and anvil, then I'm really going to be able to keep him out of range a lot easier. So this next unit of guardsmen, what I might want to do with this one is use them to, for example, capture an objective later on in the game. And there might be an objective over here that I need to get. So what I might do is put my guardsmen, again, out of line of sight behind this bottom level building with my commander. So therefore, that what I can do is move over the course of the game. And move is actually an order that I can place to move twice, but there's many units that have very good high maneuverability. So you, again, want to put them out of line of sight so that when it becomes like turn 3, 4, or 5, you've got this really good unit to go and jump on objectives, especially if it's something like end game. So they might go behind this piece of scenery here. And although this is actually open, this piece of terrain, for most tournaments, what they will say is bottom level blocks line of sight. So they would be out of line of sight to my opponent. But it's actually easier to show you visibly where things go by having the windows knocked out. So then the knight's back there, the company commander, and again with the company commander, when you put down a character like this, you want to make sure that they don't get sniped. So not only does that mean by actual snipers that are able to target characters, but also from planes. Because if you leave a character out in the open here, even with a nice screen in front of him, like so, it only takes a horrible Eldar Hemlock to fly over, plant his base here, and then all of a sudden you've just lost your company commander, you've got no more orders, you've lost Warlord, and you've got no way of regenerating your extremely important CPs if that's the Warlord trait you've gone for. So when you do so, when you put down a character like this, the most important thing you can do is literally leave a little square for this character just to pop down in the middle of that unit, okay? And you could obviously do that wherever. So just make sure when you're looking at your deployment, think where am I going to put my character down? Okay, cool. He's going to go over there, and he can fit in between the unit of guardsmen and also the knight. So no matter if a plane does come here, they would have to get rid of the unit of guardsmen and the knight before they're able to target that company commander. So that keeps him well protected and nice and safe. So then we've got, for example, this unit of Death Watch. Now these guys, they've got range 24 inches with their storm bolters. So what I want to make sure that I'm doing, again, very valuable unit, I'm just going to put these again out of line of sight. There's absolutely no need for them to be on the tabletop at the start of the game and in line of sight. And then I'm going to make sure that my captain is also with them, because he's going to give them that within 6 inches at all times. He's going to be able to give them reroll ones to hit, which is really, really important and extremely powerful over the course of the game, because you're just going to convert more of those dice rolls, especially if you roll like I do. And then finally, with this last unit of screen, what you might want to do is, again, you don't want to gift this away, so you'd probably try and hide this as well. So as you can see, by the simple fact that you are unable to see anything right now, if you were playing against me, you wouldn't have anything to possibly shoot right now. Okay, so you would be, if you were going first, the only thing you'd be able to shoot is the knight with maybe a couple of units, and hopefully my invulnerable save would be enough to keep him alive, as most Titanic vehicles have. Then, or if let's say it's an Eldar flyer you have, you could use a stratagem to give it an additional -1 to hit. Most armies have a way of fortifying their precious units, and you want to make sure you do so. So from turn 1, I'm not giving nothing at all over to my opponent to shoot at. Now, as you can see, this is actually probably quite a small army, because I've then got maybe more Death Watch in the sky that are going to deep strike down, and maybe this is just 50% of my army. Now, if you've got a slightly larger force, yeah, you might not be able to hide everything. So then what you want to start to do is put things in cover, and again, out of range. So first step is always think, what's the most precious units? Can I get them out of line of sight? Because if they're out of line of sight, they can't be shot. Next one, or the next stage down, is can I put them out of range? So that's going to force your opponent to move or advance to get in range, or get them to do something that they don't want to do. And then finally, your third level of protection is, can you get them a cover save? And you only want to give away those units that you're willing to lose. So that could be your screen, for example. But again, that might be, your screen can be really, really important later on in the game if they've got some deep striking units. So I hope you enjoyed that video. And just to summarize, the most important things that you need to remember are, what are your valuable units? What do they do? How far do they shoot? And also, when you look at your opponent's list, how far can they move and shoot? Or how far can they move in charge? And then that way you can deploy appropriately to make sure you're keeping your assets out of line of sight, out of range, and finally with a cover save. So if you want to see part 2 and part 3, there are 2 ways to do so. Number 1 is head over directly to Patreon, where we keep all of our content and all of our content library. And to do so, that is at Vanguard Tactics over on Patreon. If you're unsure on how to find that, then just by subscribing to our email list, I'm going to send you the link simply to find you and direct you to that Patreon site where you can get all the content that you need.